Awesome. So just a quick reminder before I get started, this is the Writing a Business Plan class. It's FRC centric, but really a lot of the information, it's information you can apply whether or not you're an FRC team. And it's important, I think, to write a business plan regardless of how your team is structured and what program you're in. Now, quick reminder, this presentation is being recorded, so make sure you embody your inner Woody Flowers and keep everything gracious, professional, and above the bar. So thank you all. We can go ahead and get started. This class, as I said before, is about writing a business plan. So a little bit about me before we get started. This is my 6th year involved in FIRST, which I know is rookie numbers compared to a lot. I've spent 5 years in FTC, 2 years in FRC, and this year I am refocusing to just be a FIRST volunteer. And my focus has always been on business and outreach. So let's just jump right into the agenda for today. We're going to keep it fairly simple. We're going to cover the definition, go into the purpose of a business plan, and then talk about all of the pieces and how they can come together. So the what? Business plan is a document that should reflect a team's culture, goals, and needs. It is an essential tool in the process of garnering sponsorships. Now, I know a definition may not mean much, just pulling something straight from a dictionary. So to elaborate a little bit, it's really a glimpse into your team from a business standpoint. So sponsors should be able to look at this and get a great idea of who you are and what you do. So this goes for any kind of business, any kind of organization, whether or not you're a robotics team, a nonprofit, a for-profit company, you need a business plan. And not only is it to help you All right, hello, hello. I'm seeing, looks like I maybe could send me in the Q&A if I'm back. Sorry for the technical difficulties, you guys. My internet decided to go kaputs on me for a moment. All right, perfect. So I'm here, I'm back. If I repeat myself a little bit, I apologize. But just to restart on this slide, let's talk about why. So the biggest thing is really sponsors and awards. That's some of the biggest reasons to write a business plan. It comes down to it, some of the biggest things in history, it's fame and fortune. So when you look at sponsors, as I said before, it's a tool to show sponsors what you're all about, how they can get involved, and what's really expected of them and what's expected of you. So a lot of companies even ask for a business plan whenever you're applying for grants, whenever you're applying for some kind of discount, whenever you're really interacting in the financial world, you need a business plan to work with companies. In terms of awards, there is only one award in FRC that is focused solely on the business plan, but preparing for a business plan, something that prepares you for a lot of awards. It's an extremely important thing really in the process in general. Now, let's deep dive into the specific award I mentioned, the Entrepreneurship Award. Now, I put the whole definition, the whole description of the award there, but to give you a summary, it's about the business plan. You need evidence of a cohesive team structure. You need evidence that you've identified and managed risks that are coming the way of your team. And you need someone to be able to explain how it's organized, how you make decisions, divide the workload, how you keep people engaged, how you recruit, how you train, and how you really take in success and failure. Now, the award specifically asks for one document, a summary business plan. Now, the summary business plan is not exactly what we're talking about today. The summary business plan is really just a very condensed version of everything that you put together. It's only 3 pages maximum in terms of the content, and then a 3-page appendix. The appendix includes stuff like team budget, like SWOT analysis, things that are extremely important to the business plan, but are not really able to fit in that 3-page, really just summary of everything that you've put together. So Looking First offers a lot of resources to help with all of this. The business plan, the summary business plan only requires really 7 things: a mission statement, team history, organizational structure, all of that business. And First Resources give you detailed examples. They give you descriptions of an executive summary, team overview, team management, SWOT analysis, team impact outreach, future plans, action implementation plan, team budget, sponsor benefits, team fundraising opportunities, final statement, team contact info. Now, that all may sound a little overwhelming. And really, that's all sections that First recommends, that First likes to see, but you don't need all of it. Now, comparing the summary business plan to a normal business plan, it's even a little misleading with the amount of things that are put in each. For example, a lot of what's in the summary business plan, 3 or 4 of those numbers right there, are often all put into 1 or 2 sections. So the executive summary covers a lot of the information that your summary business plan is going to need. And so really it's even more of a disparity between the amount of content you need in a normal business plan as compared to the summary. In fact, a good business plan should really be somewhere between 15 and 25 pages. First offers a wonderful template, a wonderful resource with about 30 pages of content, but it's important to keep your business plan concise. Whenever you send it to a sponsor, you don't want them to have to spend an hour reading. It's really a in-depth, cohesive summary of what your team is about and covering some of the things that you don't see anywhere else, such as finance, such as self-reflection and analysis. So really, your normal business plan should be 6 times longer than the 3 pages of the summary requires. Now let's talk about the pieces. Some of the most important pieces are the executive summary, team overview, team management, SWOT, goals, finance, and a farewell. So I broke it down into some of the key requirements, some of the things that you see in 99% of the business plans that win the Entrepreneurship Award, business plans of many successful teams. And really, it's not just about the award. So writing a business plan is about reflection. That's why you need to mention your analysis of your team. You need to mention goals. You need to analyze your finance. It's a wonderful opportunity to look back and make decisions about your team that are important whether or not you're going for one award or the other. Now, let's dive right into the pieces. First, the executive summary. Now, that's going to be your intro to the team. It includes your mission statement and a brief summary of your impact, goals, and growth. In essence, the executive summary is a summary of your whole business plan, really condensed into 1, at most 2 pages. Now, you really need to include really the broad details about your team, who you guys are, what you guys are about, and that's really what the mission statement and a summary of your goals is aimed at accomplishing. The mission statement is all about what your goal is in general, what your team was formed to do. And in the summary of your impact, goals, and growth, you talk about who you are and what you currently do. So that's really the sole question that the executive summary looks to answer. Oh, looks like it's zoomed in. Well, I'm sorry for the weird zoom. Oh, there we go. So here's some wonderful examples that First provides. So First has their own mission statement, which they've provided, and they also provided a team example. Now, you look, it's always an understood our mission is. You can feel free to include that, feel free not to include that. But really, when it comes to the mission statement, it's about the message that you're putting in it. Use strong verbs, use really a great use everything that you think would be a great overview about your team. If they had to take away one piece of information, take away this, which is first goals is to inspire young people. I should be able to read the first part of that sentence and understand who you are, what you do. Now, moving on to the team overview. This is where you include really a more cohesive, in-depth history. You talk about what your team's done, what awards you've won, and you provide information about your team. So a TIMS chart is a great way of condensing all of this information into something fairly easy to read. Now, a TIMS chart is a team information management system chart, and it includes data like how many team members you have. It breaks down demographics and gender in your team. And that's something that's really important to align with your goals. If you're talking about getting more girls involved in STEAM, that should be reflective in your team membership. It should be very clear to the people who read this that good on your promises that you're writing throughout this whole business plan. Now, in team overview, you can also talk about team mentors, team sponsors, really the people who support you. Now, that may be something you want to focus in some later sections, but the team overview is a great way to touch on it, to start talking about it, and get some of the thank yous early on. Now, team management. This section is all about your team membership and your team structure. It's important to make this decision whenever you are writing a business plan. And if your team does not have a business plan, it's important to document how your team currently runs. Now, you need to talk about your recruitment process. Judges and sponsors are really interested in how your team comes together. Maybe you're a school team, maybe you're a community team, maybe you have applications, maybe you don't. These are the kinds of questions you need to answer here. You should talk about where you go to find people to join your team. It's really covering everything about your team's recruitment. That's important not just for the sake of showing sponsors and judges, but also for reflecting, for making decisions. If you sit here and can't answer the question, how do we get people on my team, then that's a question you need to look back and answer. You need to figure that out, because even some very successful teams struggle with recruiting. And if you can't recruit, then you don't have a sustainable team. You won't have a team in the years to come, because after your current teammates graduate, your team may die. And that's an unfortunate reality that some even excellent teams have to look back and face. So also team structure. This is where you explain all your roles, you explain who leads your team, who does what on your team, and this is a great place to really flesh out what you want for your team. So it's a great way to define roles. So if your president, for example, is in charge of the club, then you need to clearly define what the president does and who they are held accountable to. Accountability is a wonderful thing, but a lot of people don't consider it whenever they're putting structures together. This is kind of an opportunity to look and see, okay, if something goes wrong, here's why, here's who's in charge of this, here's who's in charge of that. The team management section is really just, in a lot of ways, it's more for you than it is for anyone else. Now, moving on to the next section. Oh, pardon. So here are some examples. Charts are a wonderful thing to include here. And this is examples pulled straight from FIRST. So they use the example of FRC Team 68, Trucktown Thunder. They won the Entrepreneurship Award at Worlds in 2013, I believe. And regardless of what they've won, they have an excellent business plan. So they took advantage of the utilization of charts. Now, charts are a great way to summarize the information, to be able to look at it and just see this is who is held accountable to who. This is who is in charge of this thing. This is how we group our team. So as you can see, they grouped by a technical structure and a managerial structure. And they talked about all the responsibilities and different areas of the team that are, responsible, that each section is responsible for. It's a great way to reflect, as I've said before. All right, now moving on. Speaking of reflection, a SWOT analysis is extremely important. Whether or not you even, after this session, decide to make a business plan, you should analyze your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's really important to be humble and to be honest. If you are not honest with what your weaknesses are, what your threats are, that can blind you to a lot of things that may be problems. Even great teams sometimes struggle with internal issues, and it's important to talk about it, to work it out, because if you don't, then these are the kinds of problems that may prevent your team from being sustainable for the future. For example, weaknesses here are funding. If your team does not have funding, or if your team is losing sponsors year by year, that's an important thing to recognize and to get ahead of. And without looking and being honest and self-reflective on this, you could miss out on something big. So really it's important in decision-making in general, not just in your business plan, but looking and making decisions for the future of your team. But it is also a critical part of the business plan. Including it in a chart like this is a great way to look at it, have concise information just all presented in a special way. All right, so next, looking at goals. So goals, I kind of just summarized a couple sections with the idea of goals. You don't really need each and every type of plan that FRC includes. It would be great to have, but you also want to be understanding of the length of your business plan. So it may not be smart to include every little thing that FRC has provided examples for. Now, some of the big things that they mention are future plans and an action implementation plan. Now, future plans are more general. It's usually some kind of timeline. It's great to show this in a timeline form. It's really easy to look at and see, okay, in 2 years, we want our team to attend Worlds. We want our team, let's say our goal was to work with local teams, to start new teams. By 2022, we want to start 5 new teams. Those kinds of goals are more general. They're more, there's not a set description associated with them, but you can put it on a timeline and get a general idea of what you want to do. Now, an action implementation plan is a lot more specific. It takes an action, it talks about how you're going to implement that, and it talks about a deadline. Now, an action implementation plan is usually perfect for a season. So you establish season goals. We want our robot built. And we have, how are we going to implement that? Well, we're going to, our mechanical team is going to work together with our programming team, and we're going to get a functioning robot. And the due date is whenever that needs to be done by. It's a great way to hold yourself accountable to your goals. It's a great way to look at a table and see, okay, this is everything we want to do this season, and this is how we're going to do it. It's, once again, like a lot of parts of the business plan, it is more for you than anyone else. It's laying out your goals, making sure you're clear on your priorities and what you expect for the season. Once again, be honest here. If you don't think you could send your robot to the moon next year, within the next 6 months, then you may not want to put that as one of your one of the goals in your action implementation plan. All right, so yeah, here's a perfect example of the table I was talking about. So what it does is it talks about, in this case, they chose to say strategy. So strategy, in essence, is what they plan to do. It's their goal. So I'll just run through the first example. Provide for the easy transition of year 12 members to mentors. So getting your seniors to mentor your team. The actions are really how they plan on doing it, how they plan on implementing this. And their plan was to develop a junior mentor program. And also, a great thing to include in your action implementation plan is who's responsible. It's a great way of fleshing out who should do this, who needs to take action on this, and once again, goes back to that transparency and accountability. If it's, August 2012 and we know that the junior mentor program hasn't been done yet, we know who's responsible, and we know who to talk to about getting this done. So it's a great way to just really throw all of your goals, how you want to do them, and provide a tight timeline for your season. So now let's talk about finance for a little bit. Now, the main things you really want to include are a budget, and sponsor tiers and fundraisers are kind of optional, but it's really about how your team wants to go about it. So a budget is extremely important. You should include your team's budget. Be sure to include everything, not just robot, not just how much we paid for a CAD software. It's all about every expense that your team has to deal with. So T-shirts cost $500 this year. That should be included on your team's budget. That should be planned out. You should plan to accommodate for those $500. So the team's budget is about planning how you're going to spend and also keeping track of how you've spent. Having a budget outside of, just inside your business plan is very important in finance and managing your finances. But the budget in the business plan should really be, it should be kept up to date, and it should be honest. It should not leave anything out. Now, sponsor tiers and fundraisers really come to team preference. If your team does not do donation brackets, does not have, a gold tier, a platinum tier, a diamond tier for your sponsors, then don't include that in a business plan. The benefit of sponsor tiers is it gives sponsors a real expectation of what they could expect to spend and what they get in return. But some teams decide to do that on a case-by-case basis. So really, sponsor tiers, totally up to you. It's just how your team gets money. It's team by team difference. Now, fundraisers, once again, if your team does not do fundraisers, don't include a fundraising section. This is really helpful for teams that do events that are specifically aimed at fundraising for their teams, but it's not that helpful for people who do their funding solely from grants or do it solely from team membership. Once again, it's about how your team manages their own finance. And all of that should be reflected in your business plan. However you do it, reflected in your business plan, because it's information that you need to know, and it's information that your sponsors, your current sponsors, your potential sponsors should know. Now, we do have some examples here. First offers a wonderful team budget. So it just really shows the income and expenditures. It's a fairly simple table. It's just kind of summarizing, okay, our sponsors gave us $1,000 this year. And it's important to list who that was. Or if you want to keep that confidential, then just saying, donations from companies amounted to $10,000 this year. Now, down below in the left-hand side, there is kind of a template that first provides for kind of talking about your fundraiser. So give a little description about it, talk about how you advertised it, talk about materials that were needed, and give kind of the income, talk about the money of it, talk about who participated. It's really just a summary of your fundraising event, and it's important to have and to prepare for, because it asks you questions that are important in the planning process. If you don't know how you're going to advertise, then you should figure that out. It should be, hand in hand with the marketing of your event should be this kind of template with these kinds of questions. Now, here's an example of just some sponsor tiers. This is the kind of information you want to include. Just a page of every bracket, what you can expect by giving that much money. And this should kind of be at the end. It should not be up in the middle. You don't want to throw, hey, you should give us $1,000 in the middle of a business plan. It should be about how much gets what reward. And that should be kind of at the end, because theoretically, if you give this to a sponsor, they will have been reading, they've been learning about your team, and this is where they get to find out, okay, this is what my investment would pay off to. Now, teams do it differently. This just happens to be how FRC 781 Connect Knights did it. So it's once again team by team. I myself have been involved in sponsorship and the business side of teams that I've been involved with, but I've never had much luck in terms of sponsor brackets. For me, I've always done it on a case-by-case basis. Everyone does it differently. So if you look at this and you say, okay, that's not how my team likes it, then don't worry about it. All right, so a farewell. It's really an opportunity to end it strong. First really likes a final concluding sentence. It's kind of a nice thing, a nice note to end on. You talk about why you're unique. Now, not only does First like this, but sponsors like this. It's something that's a little different. It gives some kind of unique thing about your team. And kind of provides a reason for why they would want to donate. No one wants to donate to someone who is just like everybody else. It's the uniqueness in your team. It's the special flair that you bring that is what they're interested in. That's what makes them choose you over some other company, some other team, some other nonprofit. Now, at the very end, there should be your team contact information. It's good to put a coach's contact information here. It's good to put, if you have a general team email, it's good to put that there. Put a website, really plug all of your social media, anything that they could use to get in contact with you. So that's a great way to end it. And then it's the same way as in a presentation, you would give your contact information and say, hey, if you have any questions, contact. This is for questions. This is for following up. If they see your business plan and they're very interested, then they may send an email or check out your website or check out your social media so they can get a different kind of look into what you do. Now, in closing, some key takeaways are these sections are not all required. It's really what you deem is important to your team and what you deem is important to showing your team sustainability, because that's one thing that this is all about. It's about sustainability. It's about accountability. The business plan is what helps keep people in their roles, helps keep you to your team's goals and keeps you honest in that, because it's something that sponsors see. It's something that judges see. It's really something that should be the whole truth and nothing but the truth about your team. So accountability is there, and sustainability is really in making sure your team can continue on in the future. If you look at this and you realize my team is struggling in keeping people engaged, we're hemorrhaging rookies, we may be hemorrhaging sponsors, then you need to look back and see what changes you can make. Check out your strengths, check out your weaknesses, check out your opportunities, check out your threats. If there's something that you haven't done, but you identify as an opportunity, then do it. It's a great way to identify areas that your team is struggling in and identify areas that your team is succeeding in and should continue in doing. So it's really important to structuring your team, whether or not you're interested in going for a business award, going for the entrepreneurship award. All right. So now I'm going to open it up to any questions that you guys may have. Just use the Q&A. Feel free. I did cover a lot, but it wasn't, I don't know that too much of it was too confusing, so we may not have too many questions, but opening up the floor now. On an extra note, all of the information that I pulled from, besides some of my own experience, was from First's website. First has amazing resources. They have a fundraising toolkit in which they include an example business plan. They include even more in-depth descriptions of everything, and they have a full 30 pages of content for you to read through. This was just kind of some of the summarized information, just to kind of get you started, to give you an idea of what you're doing. Okay, cool. So now we have some questions coming in. Philip, great question. Your team cannot hold a fundraiser because of your school. What's important to look at here is we are in a very unique, with current restrictions, with maybe even restrictions that your school has in a normal time period, there are a lot of different avenues for you to do some kinds of fundraising. So there is some classes on sponsorship, but I can give you a bit of a taste from my own experience. Fundraisers are great for rewarding sponsors for getting people all together and involved. But in a virtual environment, that is a little weird. So it's important to try and find a virtual solution. Maybe host a virtual fundraiser. If your school doesn't allow fundraising, then it's amazing to look at other avenues, to look at grants. There are a lot of grants out there that go unapplied to, and money that could be spent on robotics is not. So it's really important to always be on the lookout, and to also identify that a FIRST robotics team is not just some robot building machine. It is about more than that, as we all know. So a lot of teams are registered as nonprofits, and there are a lot of grants out there for nonprofits, for STEAM organizations, for really everything that a FIRST team is besides a team. So it's important to look out there and to find different ways of getting funded. So what are some examples? Great question from Grant. What are some examples of what makes a team unique? So this is a very difficult question you have to ask, and it's something that you really just want summarized in one sentence. So sometimes even just the thought of it can be a little daunting. Now, I always have a bit of a cliche answer when it comes to this. On the teams I've been on, I've been very proud of the experience with the people on the team. And I think people is something that makes a team extremely unique. So talking about the team dynamic, talking about how you interact with your teammates, I think is an interesting take on something that makes your team unique. Now, you may be thinking anyone could kind of answer this, and that's why anyone could kind of answer that they're a family, that their team works well. And that's where you have to look at some of the differences. You have to see, okay, my team works extremely well together because we're all able to see each other as friends outside of FIRST. We're all able to work as a cohesive unit because of our pre-planning, because we always plan everything in advance. It's different things that your team does that make that thing unique. So people, you can talk about if your team is in a unique area, maybe you're the only FIRST team for miles around. And that in and of itself is something that makes it unique because you're supplying STEAM and FIRST to a larger community than a larger radius, a larger area than some teams are. So a great question. Now, one of the John Welsh's asked is the Entrepreneurship Award in FTC 2. Now, FTC covers the business plan a little bit differently, but all of the core things are still the same. In fact, a lot of teams who may have FRC and FTC are able to reuse the same business plan. So a lot of the basics are still the same, but the difference is in FTC, it does apply to a lot more awards. So the Think Award talks about it. Now, this year, there's some differences with the Think Award. I strongly encourage you all, if you're in FTC and attending this session, to go to the FTC Award session because we'll talk some more on this. But the business plan is really a key part of several awards. It's a key part of documentation in general for FTC. So it's important to have, even though there's not one award that's just about it, a lot of awards pull from that information. So Think Award, Inspire Award at how your team plans. Even the Motivate and Connect Award, because it talks about the goals that you have for outreach, which is extremely important. The goal, like who you're planning on reaching out to. All of those are answers that can be found in your team's business plan. So there's not an entrepreneurship award, but it's important for all the awards. All right. So another question is, what do you think is the best social media platform for this? So business plan should really be a document. Now, you can advertise it on social and try to push that content out there, but really the best way to do it, the best way to handle a business plan is to perhaps post it on your website and to send it to sponsors whenever you are interested in working with them. Now, in terms of social media to link to talk about, to social media just in general to have, it's always great for teams to connect on social media. Georgia First is active on Facebook. It's also great to be active on Twitter and Instagram, but it's also important to recognize who you're looking to target, who you're looking to talk to. For example, in general, the audience of Facebook tends to be a little bit older. So if you're looking on reaching out to parents, to sponsors, to showing that aspect of the community, what you're all about. Posting stuff on Facebook is important. And the link to the business plan is you put your Facebook on the business plan. You encourage people to go there. Because if you put your social media and a sponsor is interested in you, they will check out your social media. So it's important to have content there. If you're linking it, then have information there. Have pictures. Have details about your events. It's a great place to put information. So using Facebook, using Twitter, using Instagram are all great things. But you should just really have your business plan out on your website, if anywhere public. And any other situation would just be sending it via email if you contact sponsors. All right, so a great question from Sarah. Best ways of going about finding grants to apply for? Oh, okay, good. I'm still connected. It looks like I had a shift in connection there. So as I said earlier, it's really important to consider what besides first team you are. If you're registered as a nonprofit, there are a lot of nonprofit grants out there. And I'll be honest, some of the easiest ways of finding grants are to look at teams, to look at sponsors of other teams, to look at Georgia First sponsors. We mentioned briefly Georgia First sponsors this morning in the opening ceremonies. All of them sponsor not just Georgia First, but they sponsor first teams. So whether you're an FRC team, whether you're an FTC team, whether you're just a general first program, it's a great place to start, is to look there. Now, especially with big companies like Coca-Cola and corporations along those lines, they offer really a full kind of wing of their company is dedicated to this kind of thing. So if you go on the website of a corporation, you can find who they give to, how they give, and how to get involved in that. So that's really a great place to start, is to look there. Now, if you're interested in some local sponsors, looking at your own community is a great way to get started. You can look at who sponsors your school. That kind of information may not seem as public as you think it is. It's on stadiums. If you look at your school's football stadium, most of the time they have the names of companies listed around, and those are people who sponsored the athletic program at your school. Those are people who already are donating to educational programs at your school, or if you're not a school-based team, in your area. So that's another great way to get started, and it's really just about asking the right person. So as I said, with companies, you'll usually find a page on it where they can give you all that information and they can link grant submissions there. And if it's something more local, they may not have an established grant system, but you can reach out to local organizations. A lot of companies have a community outreach manager to speak to, and they have the ability to give to your team. So don't be afraid to ask. And remember, the business plan is a great tool for telling them about your team. Introducing yourself, sending a business plan, asking them if they'd be interested in a partnership is a great first email, a great first step to take. All right. So it looks like we are out of questions. And I know myself from online school that I love getting dismissed early. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the session. Thank you all for attending. If you were interested in contacting me, it is just elijah.peacock@wheelermagnet.com. Awesome. So thank you all again. If you're interested in going to your next session, just go ahead and remind you that the next session is on the Georgia First Symposium page. And you can get there on georgiafirst.org, or you can get there from the email sent to you from Eventbrite. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your next session.